For millennia, the Galactic Council has ranked civilizations by their biological superiority. Crystal-boned Zephyrians who can shatter steel with a thought, plasma-blooded infernals who melt through starship hulls, and energy beings who manipulate matter itself. Humans. They've barely registered on the threat assessment scale. No natural weapons, no elemental powers, no psychic abilities. Just pink, squishy creatures who somehow stumbled into space travel. But when the most advanced mining operation in 3 sectors hits an impossible obstacle, a planetary core so dense it breaks their quantum extractors, the Council faces a choice: abandon the richest mineral deposit ever discovered, or accept help from the species they've spent decades mocking. What they're about to witness will shatter everything they thought they knew about strength, determination, and what it truly means to be powerful. Because sometimes the most devastating force in the universe isn't magic or technology. It's a human with a drill and absolutely nothing to lose. The galaxy is about to learn why Earth's children don't just survive impossible odds, they thrive on them. Commander Zekthara's crystalline form vibrated with frustration as he stared at the readouts on his holo display. The numbers made no sense. According to every scanner, probe, and quantum analyzer at his disposal, the object buried 3 kilometers beneath Kepler 442b's surface shouldn't exist. "Run the scan again," he commanded, his voice creating harmonic resonances that made the bridge's metal walls ring like struck bells. The Zephyrian's natural ability to manipulate sound waves was legendary throughout the galaxy, capable of shattering reinforced titanium with a focused tone. Yet here he stood, utterly defeated by a chunk of rock. His aide, a nervous Velconian whose purple tentacles twitched with anxiety, operated the controls with practiced efficiency. The deep core scanner hummed to life, sending penetrating beams through layers of stone and mineral toward their target. Minutes passed before the results appeared. "Sir," the Velconian whispered, his translator barely catching the subdued tone. "The readings are identical. Density coefficient of 47.3. That's impossible, sir. Nothing in the known galaxy approaches that level of molecular compression except neutron star material." Zekthara's crystal exoskeleton darkened with anger. He'd been drilling for 6 months on this backwater planet, chasing sensor readings that promised the largest cache of quantum crystals ever discovered. The Galactic Council had assigned him their most advanced mining platform, equipped with molecular disruptors that could carve through a moon's core like soft cheese. Yet this single object, roughly spherical and no larger than a transport shuttle, had destroyed 3 of their most powerful extraction tools and resisted every attempt at analysis. "What does the geology team say?" Zekthara asked, though he dreaded the answer. The aide's tentacles coiled tighter. "Dr. Ahana believes it's not natural, sir. The surrounding rock shows no signs of impact or fusion. Whatever this object is, it either formed under conditions that shouldn't exist in this universe, or what? Or was made by someone with technology far beyond our current understanding." The bridge fell silent except for the steady hum of the mining platform's reactors. Around them, through the viewport, the planet Kepler 442b rotated slowly, its brown and gray surface scarred by their excavation efforts. What had begun as a routine mining operation had become a mystery that threatened to end Commander Zekthara's career. He was a veteran of 47 extraction campaigns, had stripped resources from gas giants and asteroid fields across 3 sectors. His crews had never failed to complete an assignment. The very idea that some primitive planet could defeat Zephyr engineering was absurd. "Sir," another voice called from the communication station, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the Council." Zekthara straightened his towering form. On screen, the holo display flickered and resolved into the imposing figure of Counselor Drexhan, whose energy-based form crackled with barely contained power. The luminal race existed as pure energy given consciousness, capable of manipulating matter at the atomic level. If anyone could solve their problem, it would be him. "Commander," Drexhan's voice resonated directly into their minds, bypassing their ears entirely. I trust you have good news about the extraction? Counselor, we've encountered an unexpected obstacle. The target object appears to be composed of material with unprecedented density. Our standard extraction protocols have proven ineffective. The energy being's form pulsed brighter. Define ineffective. Zekthara swallowed his pride. Complete equipment failure, sir. 3 molecular disruptors have been destroyed, attempting to breach the object's surface. Our quantum scanners suggest the material is compressed beyond theoretical limits. For a long moment, Drexhan said nothing. Around him, the council chamber was visible, filled with representatives from dozens of species. Zekthara could see the massive Titan-class Gorlax with their stone hides, the ethereal Celestines floating in their containment fields, and the shape-shifting morphs in their default crystalline forms. Each species represented the pinnacle of biological evolution in their respective categories. "Show me the data," Drexhan commanded. Zekthara transmitted the files directly. He watched the counselor's energy patterns fluctuate as he processed the information, calculating with a mind that operated at near-quantum speeds. "This is remarkable," Drexhan finally admitted. "The density readings are indeed beyond our current understanding. However, the mineral content of the surrounding area confirms the presence of quantum crystals in unprecedented quantities. This extraction cannot be abandoned. Sir, with respect, I don't see how we can proceed. We've exhausted our standard options, and bringing in heavier equipment would take months. Perhaps," Drexhan's form brightened with what might have been amusement, "it's time to consider non-standard options." Before Zekthara could ask what that meant, another voice spoke up from the council chamber. The translation system identified the speaker as Regent Voss of the Hegemony Trade Coalition. "If I may suggest, Counselor," Voss said, his mechanical voice carrying an undertone of calculation, "there is one option we haven't considered. The humans have recently petitioned for inclusion in extraction contracts." A ripple of what could only be described as laughter passed through the council chamber. Zekthara's own crystalline structure chimed in harmony with his amusement. "The humans?" he asked. "Counselor, surely you're not serious. Their technology is centuries behind ours. They still use chemical explosives and mechanical tools." "Precisely," Regent Voss continued. "Sometimes primitive methods succeed where advanced technology fails. Their request specifically mentioned expertise in impossible excavations and extreme drilling operations. Perhaps their crude approaches might prove effective where our sophisticated tools have not." Drexhan's energy form pulsed thoughtfully. "The humans do have a reputation for persistence. Their files indicate they've successfully extracted resources from environments that would challenge more advanced species." Zekthara couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You're suggesting we hire a species that barely qualifies for space travel to solve a problem that's defeated Zephyrian engineering?" "I'm suggesting," Drexhan's mental voice carried a note of warning, "that you explore all available options before reporting failure to the Council. The quantum crystal deposits on that planet represent enough raw materials to power a dozen systems. We cannot simply walk away." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Zekthara alone with his doubts, and a decision he never thought he'd have to make. Around him, his crew exchanged uncertain glances. The idea of calling in humans, soft, weak, technologically inferior humans, was almost insulting. But as he stared at the readings showing their shattered equipment and the impassive object that had destroyed it, Zekthara began to wonder if pride was a luxury he could afford. "Sir," his aide asked quietly, "what are your orders?" Zekthara's crystalline form dimmed with resignation. "Send a message to the Human Liaison Office. Tell them we have a drilling problem that might interest them." "Should I mention the nature of the obstacle?" "No," Zekthara decided after a moment. "Let them see for themselves. If they're half as persistent as their reputation suggests, they'll want to examine the site personally." As his crew began preparations for the human arrival, Zekthara couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to witness something that would challenge everything he thought he knew about strength and capability. 3 days later, the human ship arrived. Zekthara watched from the bridge as the vessel approached their mining platform. Compared to the sleek, crystalline architecture of Zephyrian ships, or the flowing organic curves of Vulcanian craft. The human vessel was almost brutally functional. Angular, dense, and covered in what appeared to be redundant armor plating, it looked less like a ship and more like a flying fortress. "They're requesting permission to dock," his communications officer reported. "Granted, and prepare the conference room. We might as well make this official." 30 minutes later, Zekthara found himself face-to-face with a human delegation. There were 3 of them, each barely reaching his shoulder height, despite his own species' modest stature. They wore simple work clothes rather than formal diplomatic attire, and their expressions showed a mixture of curiosity and confidence that seemed almost childlike. The leader, a middle-aged female with graying hair, stepped forward and extended her hand in the human gesture of greeting. "Commander Zekthara, I'm Sarah Mitchell, drilling supervisor for Terran Deep Extraction. Thank you for considering our services." Zekthara accepted the handshake, surprised by the strength of her grip. For such a small being, she possessed remarkable physical power. "Ms. Mitchell, I must admit, we're somewhat uncertain about this arrangement. Our problem has defeated some of the most advanced technology in the galaxy." Sarah's smile widened. "That's what we specialize in, Commander. The impossible jobs. Mind if we take a look at this mystery object of yours?" As they made their way to the scanning station, Zekthara found himself studying the humans more closely. Unlike the elegant Celestines or the imposing Gorlaks, humans appeared almost absurdly fragile. Their skin was soft, unmarked by natural armor or protective scales. They possessed no visible natural weapons, no energy manipulation abilities, no advanced sensory organs. Yet as Sarah examined the sensor readings, her expression showed no sign of intimidation or doubt. "Density coefficient of 47.3, she mused, tapping the display with one finger. "That's definitely unusual. What kind of tools have you tried?" Zekthara listed their failed attempts: molecular disruptors, quantum borers, plasma cutters, gravitic crushers. Each had either broken against the object's surface or simply failed to register any effect. Sarah said when he finished. "You know, we had a similar problem on Europa about 5 years ago. Different scale, but the principle was the same. Sometimes you need to think sideways." Thinking sideways, one of her companions, a younger male with calloused hands, spoke up. "What she means is, maybe you're overthinking it. Sometimes the direct approach works better than the clever one." Zekthara's crystalline structure chimed with skepticism. "I fail to see how crude methods could succeed where advanced technology has failed." "Well," Sarah said, pulling out a small device that looked positively ancient compared to their scanners, "there's only one way to find out. Do you have a way to get us down to the surface? You want to examine the object directly?" "Can't solve a drilling problem from orbit," the third human, an elderly male with intense blue eyes, said simply. "Got to get your hands dirty." As they prepared for the surface expedition, Zekthara couldn't help but wonder what he'd gotten himself into. The humans seemed confident, even eager, but their primitive equipment and straightforward approach struck him as hopelessly naive. He was about to discover just how wrong he could be. The shuttle ride to the surface was unlike anything Zekthara had experienced. Instead of the smooth, silent glide of Zephyrian transport pods, the human shuttle bucked and rattled through the atmosphere like a controlled explosion. The humans seemed completely unfazed by the violent motion, chatting casually about technical specifications and equipment ratings as if they weren't plummeting toward the ground in what felt like a barely controlled metal box. When they finally reached the excavation site, Zekthara's doubts only deepened. The humans emerged from their shuttle, carrying cases of equipment that looked like museum pieces. Heavy mechanical devices with moving parts and manual controls. No crystalline matrices, no energy channeling systems, no quantum processing units. Sarah approached the edge of their excavation and knelt down, running her hands over the exposed rock face. Her fingers traced the drill marks left by their failed attempts, reading the stone like ancient text. "Interesting," she murmured. "The rock around the object shows stress fractures consistent with massive compression forces. Whatever that thing is, it's been under incredible pressure for a very long time. Our geological analysis suggests the object predates the planet's formation, Zekthara offered. That would explain a few things. Sarah stood and turned to her companions. Tom, break out the seismic gear. Jack, I want you to set up the acoustic mapper. We need to understand what we're dealing with before we start drilling. As the humans went to work, Zekthara watched in fascination. Their equipment was crude, but effective, using sound waves and vibration analysis to build a three-dimensional model of the underground object. Unlike his own people's harmonic manipulation abilities, the humans' acoustic tools were purely mechanical, relying on precise timing and mathematical calculations rather than natural talent. Commander, Tom called out after an hour of scanning. You might want to see this. The portable display showed a wireframe model of the mysterious object. It was indeed spherical, but the internal structure was far more complex than their orbital scans had suggested. Layers upon layers of compressed material formed intricate patterns within the sphere, almost like, "It's hollow," Jack said, his weathered face creasing with concentration. Not completely, but there are definitely void spaces inside. Chambers, maybe. Artificial, Sarah concluded. This isn't a natural formation. Someone built this thing. Zekthara's harmonic resonance shifted to a higher frequency, expressing his amazement. But the density readings are probably accurate for the shell material, Sarah interrupted. But if there are hollow sections inside, the overall mass distribution will be different than your scanners assumed. That might explain why your molecular disruptors failed. I don't understand. Tom grinned and hefted what appeared to be a primitive drilling apparatus. Molecular disruptors work by breaking atomic bonds, right? But if the shell material has some kind of exotic molecular structure, maybe artificially compressed or held together by forces we don't understand, then disrupting the bonds might not be enough. Sometimes, Sarah added, you need to use good, old-fashioned mechanical force. Crack it open like a nut instead of trying to dissolve it like sugar. Zekthara stared at the humans in disbelief. They were suggesting that brute force could succeed where the most sophisticated technology in the galaxy had failed. It was absurd. It was impossible. It's worth a try, he heard himself saying. Sarah's smile was brilliant. Now you're thinking like a human. The next morning brought a sight that would haunt Zekthara's memories for the rest of his long life. The humans had spent the night setting up their equipment, and what emerged from their shuttles looked like something from a pre-industrial nightmare. The drilling rig stood 30 meters tall, a lattice of steel beams, and hydraulic pistons that vibrated with barely contained mechanical energy. Steam leaked from pressure joints, and the entire structure seemed to pulse with a rhythm that felt almost alive. Next to the elegant curves and crystalline perfection of Galactic Council technology, it looked like a monument to crude functionality. That's your solution? Zekthara asked, his harmonic voice carrying notes of disbelief. Sarah patted one of the massive support beams with obvious affection. Meet Big Bertha. She's broken through everything from Martian bedrock to European ice sheets. If anything can crack your mystery sphere, it's her. The drill bit itself was a work of brutal artistry. Diamond-tipped tungsten carbide teeth arranged in a spiral pattern, each one the size of Zekthara's fist. The shaft was as thick as a tree trunk and disappeared into the mechanical depths of the drilling assembly like the fong of some primordial beast. The principle is simple, Tom explained as he ran diagnostic checks on hydraulic systems. We're not trying to disintegrate the material at the molecular level. We're just going to hit it really, really hard until it breaks. That seems... Zekthara struggled for words, inelegant. Elegance is overrated, Jack said from his position at the control console. The elderly human's fingers danced over manual switches and analog gauges with practiced precision. Effectiveness is what matters. As the humans made their final preparations, word of the drilling attempt spread throughout the mining platform. Representatives from a dozen species gathered at observation posts, drawn by curiosity and skepticism in equal measure. Zekthara could see Gorlax with their stone-hard hides shaking their massive heads in disbelief, while ethereal Celestines flickered with what he interpreted as amusement. Commander Veltar of the Infernal Legion materialized beside him in a burst of superheated plasma, his energy form crackling with barely contained fire. "You cannot be serious, Zekthara." Veltar's mental voice carried the heat of a star's core. "These primitives think they can succeed where plasma cutters have failed? Their tools are made of mere metal and stone." "Their confidence is surprising," Zekthara admitted, "and their analysis of the object revealed details our scanners missed." "Lucky guesses," Veltar dismissed. "Watch them break their crude toys against that sphere, then perhaps we could discuss serious solutions." But as the drilling rig came online, something unexpected happened. The mechanical roar that emerged from the human equipment was unlike anything the assembled aliens had ever heard. It wasn't the clean hum of energy weapons or the harmonic resonance of crystalline tools. It was raw, brutal, and absolutely relentless. The drill bit engaged with the planet's surface and began its descent. Rock and soil sprayed away from the cutting edge as the massive tool chewed through layers of stone that had resisted their best efforts for months. The sound was deafening, a primal scream of metal against mineral that seemed to make the very air vibrate. "How are they maintaining structural integrity?" a morphic engineer whispered to his companion. "The stress forces should tear that apparatus apart." "Redundant systems," Tom called out, apparently overhearing the question despite the noise. "When one part breaks, another takes the load. We build these things to fail gracefully." Hour by hour, the drill descended. The humans worked in shifts, monitoring gauges and adjusting parameters with a dedication that bordered on obsession. They ate simple meals at their posts, caught brief naps between equipment checks, and maintained their vigil over the mechanical beast they'd awakened. Zekthara found himself drawn to watch their methods more closely. Where his own people would use harmonic resonance to sense stress patterns in the rock, the humans relied on vibration sensors and acoustic monitors. Where luminal engineers would manipulate matter at the quantum level, the humans simply applied more force. But there was intelligence in their brutality. They didn't just drill blindly downward. They adjusted their approach constantly, reading the feedback from their sensors and modifying their technique to match the changing conditions. When they hit a particularly hard layer, they switched to a different bit design. When the rock became unstable, they reinforced the shaft with steel casing. "It's like watching evolution in fast forward," Dr. Ahana, the Velconian geologist, observed. Her tentacles writhed with fascination as she studied the human techniques. They adapt their methods in real time, learning from each meter of progress. By the end of the second day, the drill had reached a depth of 2.5 kilometers. The humans estimated they were less than 500 meters from their target, but the real test was yet to come. According to their scans, the object was surrounded by a shell of the same ultra-dense material that had defeated the Galactic Council's best equipment. "This is where it gets interesting," Sarah announced as the third day dawned. She looked tired but determined, her clothing stained with oil and rock dust. "We're about to hit the outer shell. Everyone might want to stand back." The drill bit made contact with the sphere's surface at 14:32 local time. The sound changed immediately, transforming from the steady grinding of normal excavation to a harsh, metallic shriek that seemed to cut through bone and crystal alike. Sparks flew from the cutting edge as diamond teeth met resistance unlike anything they'd encountered. But the drill didn't stop. The humans had anticipated this moment. Tom increased the hydraulic pressure, while Jack adjusted the rotation speed to optimize the cutting action. Sarah monitored stress readings and called out adjustments to her team with the precision of a conductor directing an orchestra. "Shell thickness approximately 3 meters, she reported over the noise. "Composition still unknown, but we're making progress." Progress. Veltar's plasma form flared with disbelief. "They've barely scratched the surface." But Zekthara's enhanced hearing could detect something the Infernal Commander had missed. The pitch of the drilling was changing, becoming higher and more strained. The drill was indeed cutting through the mysterious material slowly but steadily. How is this possible? Dr. Ihana whispered. Our molecular disruptors couldn't even mark that surface. Different approach, Tom explained during a brief pause in the drilling. Molecular disruptors try to break atomic bonds, but atoms are mostly empty space. Sometimes it's more effective to just push them out of the way. The explanation made no scientific sense to any of the assembled aliens, but the results were undeniable. Meter by meter, the human drill bored through material that had resisted every other attempt at penetration. On the fourth day, breakthrough. The drilling rig suddenly lurched forward as the bit punched through the inner surface of the sphere's shell. Atmospheric sensors detected a pressure differential, indicating that the hollow spaces inside were indeed filled with gas rather than solid matter. We're in, Sarah announced with quiet satisfaction. Deploying survey probe. A slender cable descended through the drill shaft, carrying a tiny camera and sensor package into the mysterious chambers below. The humans gathered around a portable monitor as the first images came through. What they saw left even the jaded human engineers speechless. The interior of the sphere was not the simple hollow space their scans had suggested. Instead, it contained an intricate network of chambers and corridors, all carved from the same ultra-dense material as the shell. The walls were covered with symbols that seemed to shift and flow in the probe's light, creating patterns that hurt to look at directly. This is definitely artificial, Jack said, his voice unusually subdued. But the construction techniques are like nothing I've ever seen. More disturbing were the objects visible in some of the chambers. Geometric shapes that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions, their surfaces reflecting light in ways that violated basic physics. Crystalline formations that pulsed with their own internal luminescence, casting shadows that moved independently of their sources. We need to notify the council immediately, Zekthara said, his harmonic voice trembling with excitement and fear. This discovery could rewrite our understanding of galactic history. But Sarah was already issuing new orders to her team. Prep the extraction package. We're going down there. Down there. Zekthara's crystalline form chimed with alarm. MS. Mitchell, we have no idea what we're dealing with. The prudent course would be to study the site from a safe distance. Sarah looked at him with the same expression she'd worn when examining their failed drilling attempts. Patient, determined, and utterly fearless. Commander, we didn't come all this way to peek through a keyhole. Besides, she grinned, somebody built this thing. Don't you want to know who? The extraction package turned out to be another example of human engineering pragmatism. Instead of sophisticated teleportation systems or gravitic lifts, the humans simply modified their drilling shaft to serve as an access tunnel. They installed ladder rungs along one side and a mechanical lift system that could carry people and equipment up and down the 3-kilometer shaft. This is insane, Veltar protested as the humans suited up in simple atmospheric gear. You're proposing to descend into an unknown alien artifact using rope and pulleys? Works on Earth, Tom said cheerfully as he checked his oxygen supply. Besides, sometimes the simple approach is the safest. Fewer things to go wrong. The descent took nearly 2 hours. Zekthara accompanied the human team, partly from scientific curiosity and partly from a sense of responsibility. If they were killed by whatever lurked in the sphere, he wanted to witness their final moments. But as they reached the bottom of the shaft and stepped through the opening they drilled in the sphere's inner surface, Zekthara realized that death might be the least of their concerns. The chamber they entered was vast, its walls curving away into darkness despite the powerful lights the humans had brought. The air itself seemed to thicken around them, taking on a weight and texture that suggested it was more than simple atmosphere. Readings are off the charts, Jack reported, consulting a handheld scanner that looked like a child's toy compared to Galactic Council equipment. Electromagnetic anomalies, gravitational distortions, and some kind of subspace resonance I can't identify. The symbols on the walls were clearer now, visible as intricate carvings that seemed to extend into the material itself. They formed patterns that suggested language or mathematical formulae. But following the logic from one symbol to the next made Zekthara's consciousness feel stretched and twisted. "Don't stare at them too long," Sarah advised, noticing his discomfort. "Tom made that mistake on our first deep cave expedition. Took him 3 days to stop seeing double." They moved deeper into the structure, following corridors that branched and merged according to no geometric principles Zekthara could understand. The humans navigated with simple rope markers and hand-drawn maps, trusting their own senses over sophisticated scanning equipment. The builders definitely weren't using conventional physics, Tom observed as they passed through a section where the ceiling curved impossibly back on itself. "Space seems to work differently in here." "Different how?" "Well, according to my measurements, we've walked about 1 kilometer deeper into the sphere. Problem is, the sphere is only 200 meters in diameter." The humans accepted this impossibility with the same casual pragmatism they'd shown toward every other challenge. They documented the anomalies, marked their path, and kept moving forward with the confidence of people who'd seen impossible things before. It was in the central chamber that they found the real prize. The room opened before them like a cathedral, its walls soaring upward into shadows that their lights couldn't penetrate. In the center stood a structure that defied every attempt at description. Part machine, part sculpture, part living organism. It pulsed with rhythms that seemed to synchronize with their heartbeats, and its surface showed reflections of places that weren't there. "What is it?" Zekthara whispered. Sarah approached the structure with the fearless curiosity that seemed to define her species. She reached out with one gloved hand and touched the surface. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Light exploded through the chamber as the structure came alive, systems that had been dormant for eons suddenly surging with renewed power. The air filled with harmonics that made Zekthara's crystalline form ring like struck bells. And then, impossibly, they heard a voice. "Welcome," it said in perfect galactic standard, though the words seemed to come from inside their own minds. "We have been waiting for you to find the key." Sarah pulled her hand back, but the light continued to pulse through the alien machinery. "Who are you?" she asked with typical human directness. "We were the first," the voice replied. "Before your civilizations discovered fire, before your stars were born, we explored the spaces between spaces. We built this monument to mark what was lost and what must be found again." What was lost? The understanding that strength comes not from power, but from persistence. Your species remembers this truth, small one. That is why you could open what others could not. Zekthara felt his worldview shifting like tectonic plates. This ancient intelligence was suggesting that the humans had succeeded not despite their primitive methods, but because of them. That there was something in their approach that aligned with fundamental principles the advanced species had forgotten. "The others will never believe this," he said. The voice seemed to smile, though it had no physical form. "Then, perhaps it is time to show them." The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 3 days after the discovery. Representatives from 47 species gathered in the great chamber orbiting the galactic core, their diverse forms creating a tapestry of evolution's infinite possibilities. Energy beings flickered beside crystal entities, while mechanical intelligences shared space with organic collectives. Counselor Drexhan's luminous form dominated the speaker's platform as he addressed the assembly. "We are here to evaluate a discovery that may fundamentally alter our understanding of galactic history and technological development." Zekthara stood at the witness podium, his crystalline structure resonating nervously as hundreds of alien eyes, sensors, and consciousness probes focused on him. Beside him, the 3 humans looked impossibly small and fragile among the assembled might of galactic civilization. "The object we discovered predates all known civilizations," Zekthara began, his harmonic voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "Our initial assessment suggested it was composed of materials with impossible density characteristics, resistant to all conventional extraction methods. A rumble of skeptical harmonics rose from the Zephyrian delegation. Yet you claim these humans succeeded where our technology failed. The speaker was High Resonator Keth Moore, whose crystalline form blazed with indignant light. Humans who lack even basic harmonic manipulation abilities? Sarah stepped forward. Her simple work clothes a stark contrast to the elaborate ceremonial attire worn by most delegates. If I may, Counselor, the problem wasn't with your technology. It was with your assumptions about how the technology should be used. Explain, Drexon commanded, his energy form pulsing with interest. Your molecular disruptors, plasma cutters, and quantum borers all try to break down material at the atomic level, Sarah continued. That's incredibly sophisticated, and it works great on normal matter. But this sphere wasn't made from normal matter. The builders used compression techniques that created atomic bonds our physics can't fully explain. Tom joined her at the podium, carrying a portable display unit that looked primitive compared to the Council's holographic systems. Think of it like a woven cable, he said, activating a simple animation. Each individual thread might be weak, but weave them together properly, and you create something stronger than steel. Your disruptors were trying to cut the individual threads, but the weave pattern kept redistributing the stress. So, instead of trying to cut the threads, Sarah concluded, we just punched a hole through the whole thing. Brute force applied at exactly the right point, with enough persistence to overcome the material's resistance. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of translated voices, harmonic resonances, and electromagnetic pulses as delegates expressed their disbelief. The idea that crude mechanical force could succeed where quantum manipulation had failed seemed to violate everything they understood about technology and progress. Commander Veltar's plasma form blazed brighter as he materialized at his delegation's position. This is absurd. These primitives are claiming that their crude methods are superior to technologies developed over millions of years of evolution. Not superior, Jack said quietly, but his words somehow carried throughout the chamber. Just different. Every tool has its purpose. Sometimes you need a scalpel, sometimes you need a hammer. And sometimes, Sarah added with a slight smile, you need someone stubborn enough to keep hammering when everyone else has given up. Dr. Ahana of the Vulcanian Science Collective raised her position tentacle for attention. If I may, the acoustic analysis of their drilling operation revealed some fascinating characteristics. The humans didn't simply apply random force. They modulated their approach continuously, reading feedback from the material and adjusting their technique in real time. Adaptive methodology, Tom nodded. We call it learning on the job. When Plan A doesn't work, you try Plan B. When Plan B fails, you move to Plan C. And if all else fails, you make up Plan D as you go along. Regent Voss of the Trade Coalition leaned forward in his mechanical chair. This adaptability you describe, is it a trained skill or an innate characteristic of your species? The three humans exchanged glances. Both, I guess, Sarah said. Humans have always had to deal with environments that wanted to kill us. No natural armor, no energy manipulation, no telepathy. We survived by being stubborn and creative. And by working together, Tom added, no human could have drilled that shaft alone. But three humans with the right tools and enough determination, we can move mountains. Literally, as it turned out. The humans had brought recordings of their drilling operation, and the assembled delegates watched in fascination as the crude-looking equipment chewed through rock that had defeated their best technology. The persistence was remarkable, but more impressive was the teamwork. Each human had specific responsibilities, but they coordinated their efforts with an efficiency that rivaled hive mind species. Show them the core chamber recordings, Drexon commanded. The display shifted to show the interior of the ancient sphere. Even through the primitive human recording equipment, the impossible geometry and alien architecture were clearly visible. But it was the humans' reaction that captured the delegates' attention. Where most species would have retreated in the face of such obvious danger, the humans had pushed forward with methodical courage. The entity we encountered identified itself as a remnant of the first civilization, Zekthara explained. It claimed to have been waiting for a species that understood the true nature of strength. "Which is?" inquired Sage Mordeath of the Contemplative Order, her ethereal form flickering with curiosity. "That strength isn't about having the most powerful weapons or the most advanced technology," Sarah replied. "It's about not giving up when everyone else says something is impossible." The ancient intelligence had shared more than philosophy during their encounter. Through the artifacts they discovered in the sphere, it had revealed glimpses of the first civilization's history. They had been builders on a scale that dwarfed even the current galactic community, constructing megastructures that spanned solar systems and wielding technologies that treated the laws of physics as mere suggestions. But their greatest strength had also been their greatest weakness. They had become so focused on elegant solutions and perfect efficiency that they'd lost the ability to adapt when faced with truly unprecedented challenges. When the universe itself began to change in ways their models couldn't predict, they had been unable to evolve their thinking quickly enough to survive. The sphere was their final message, Tom explained, a test to see if any future civilization could demonstrate the flexibility and persistence needed to avoid their fate. "And you believe humans possess these qualities?" High Resonator Keth Moore's skepticism was audible in his harmonic overtones. "I believe," Sarah said carefully, "that humans are very good at solving problems that don't have obvious solutions. We've been doing it our entire history." To demonstrate their point, the humans had prepared a practical exhibition. Under carefully controlled conditions, they had set up a series of extraction challenges that mimicked common mining and construction problems. Each challenge had been designed to defeat conventional solutions, requiring unconventional approaches and adaptive thinking. The first challenge involved extracting a delicate crystal matrix from within a block of unstable composite material. Traditional methods would either shatter the crystals or trigger a cascade failure that would destroy the entire sample. The Zephyrian delegation attempted first, using their natural harmonic abilities to resonate the composite material at frequencies that should have separated it cleanly from the crystals. The result was spectacular and complete failure, as harmonic feedback created stress patterns that pulverized everything. Next came the luminal representatives, applying precise quantum manipulation to selectively phase the composite material out of normal spacetime. This approach worked better, actually removing about 30% of the material before quantum uncertainty effects made further progress impossible. The Infernals tried plasma cutting at temperatures calibrated to sublimate the composite while leaving the crystals intact. They succeeded in removing another 20% of the material before thermal stress began fracturing the crystal matrix. "May we?" Sarah asked politely. The humans' approach was embarrassingly simple. Instead of trying to remove the composite material, they drilled tiny holes around the crystal matrix and injected an expanding foam solution that hardened into a protective shell. Then, they used cold liquid nitrogen to make the composite material brittle, followed by carefully controlled mechanical vibration to shake it apart. The entire extraction took 15 minutes and recovered the crystal matrix completely intact. "The key," Tom explained to the stunned delegates, "is thinking about the problem sideways. Instead of asking, 'How do we remove the composite?' we asked, 'How do we protect the crystals while the composite removes itself?'" The second challenge was even more dramatic. A structural support beam had to be replaced while maintaining the integrity of the framework it supported. Standard engineering protocols required shutting down the entire system, removing the damaged beam, and rebuilding the support matrix from scratch. The humans studied the problem for exactly 3 minutes before beginning work. They used a technique they called scaffolding, temporarily supporting the load with auxiliary structures while they cut away the damaged beam in sections. Each section was replaced individually, allowing them to maintain structural integrity throughout the process. The entire operation took half the time of conventional methods and required no system shutdown. "Where did you learn this technique?" Dr. Ihana asked, her tentacles writhing with excitement. "Bridge repair on Earth," Jack replied matter-of-factly. Sometimes you can't stop traffic just to fix a bridge. But it was the third challenge that truly shocked the assembled delegates. The problem was deliberately impossible. Extract valuable minerals from a sample that was actively trying to regenerate itself. The material had been engineered with self-repair mechanisms that would restore any damage within minutes. Most species approach this as a technological problem, trying to find ways to disrupt the regeneration mechanisms or extract minerals faster than they could be replaced. All of these attempts failed. The humans took one look at the self-repairing sample and started laughing. "What do you find amusing?" Counselor Drexon inquired. "It's not impossible," Sarah grinned. "It's just wasteful to fight the regeneration. Why not work with it instead?" Their solution was brilliantly simple. Instead of trying to prevent the material from regenerating, they created a controlled regeneration cycle. They extracted small amounts of material, allowed it to regenerate, then extracted slightly more material from the expanded sample. By carefully timing their extraction to match the regeneration rate, they were able to harvest far more material than the original sample had contained. "You're farming the mineral sample," Dr. Ahana realized with amazement. "Sustainable resource extraction," Tom nodded. "Give the material what it needs to regenerate, and it'll produce more than you could ever take by force." The demonstration continued for 6 hours, with the humans solving challenge after challenge through approaches that no other species had considered. They turned problems into opportunities, obstacles into advantages, and impossible tasks into routine procedures. By the end of the session, the council chamber was filled with a silence that spoke louder than any debate. The humans had proven their point not through argument or theory, but through simple, practical demonstration. "The question before us," Counselor Drexon finally said, "is what these revelations mean for our understanding of galactic civilization." High Resonator Kethmore's crystalline form dimmed with something that might have been humility. "It appears we may have underestimated the value of adaptive methodology. More than that," Regent Voss added thoughtfully, "we may need to reconsider our entire approach to technological development. These humans have shown us that advancement isn't always about more sophisticated tools. Sometimes it's about more sophisticated thinking." Sarah stood once more at the podium, her simple presence somehow commanding attention from beings who wielded the power of stars. "With respect, Counselor," she said, "I think you're overcomplicating it again. We're not smarter than you, and we're definitely not more advanced. We're just really, really stubborn. When something seems impossible, we keep trying until it becomes possible." "And that," said a new voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, "is precisely why you were chosen." The ancient intelligence from the sphere had somehow projected itself into the council chamber. Its presence felt as a gentle pressure against every consciousness present. The first civilization fell because they forgot that the universe does not care about elegance or efficiency. The entity continued. It cares about persistence, adaptation, and the willingness to try solutions that seem foolish to those who call themselves wise. "You survived," Drexon observed. "Why did you not simply share your knowledge with emerging civilizations?" "Knowledge cannot be given," the entity replied. "It must be earned. Each species must find its own path to understanding, or they will repeat our mistakes. But now, at last, we have found a species that remembers what we forgot." The implications hung heavy in the chamber air. For millennia, galactic civilization had advanced through increasing specialization and technological sophistication. But the humans had demonstrated that there was another path, one that valued flexibility over power, persistence over elegance. "What happens now?" someone asked. The humans exchanged one of their quick, meaningful glances. Sarah smiled with the same expression she'd worn when facing down an impossible drilling problem. "Now," she said, "we get back to work. There are a lot of impossible problems in this galaxy, and someone has to solve them." As the session adjourned and delegates began filing out of the chamber, Zekthara found himself approaching the human delegation. His crystalline form resonated with uncertainty. searching for words to express concepts he was still struggling to understand. "Ms. Mitchell," he said finally, "I believe I owe you an apology. When I first requested your assistance, I expected you to fail. I thought your primitive methods would prove inadequate against advanced challenges." Sarah's smile was warm and completely without malice. "No apology needed, Commander. We're used to people underestimating us. It's actually kind of an advantage. Nobody sees us coming until we're already there. But how do you maintain such confidence in the face of impossible odds?" The question seemed to puzzle her. Who says the odds are impossible? There's always a way through, around, over, or under any problem. Sometimes you just have to be creative enough to find it. Tom joined the conversation, wiping oil stains from his hands with a cloth that had seen better decades. "Plus, we've got a secret weapon that most species don't have. Which is, we're too stupid to know when to quit." The humans' laughter filled the chamber, a sound that seemed to carry more warmth and strength than all the advanced technologies surrounding them. And for the first time in his long career, Zekthara began to understand that perhaps intelligence wasn't measured in computational power or energy manipulation. Perhaps it was measured in the willingness to keep trying when everyone else had given up. 6 months after the Council demonstration, the galaxy was experiencing what historians would later call the human revolution. It wasn't a political upheaval or technological breakthrough, but something far more profound, a fundamental shift in how problems were approached and solutions were conceived. The changes started small. On Zirian Prime, a Velconian engineering team facing a collapsed mining tunnel did something unprecedented. Instead of calling for heavy excavation equipment and sophisticated rescue robots, they contacted the nearest human contractor. Sarah Mitchell's growing reputation had spread through trade networks faster than quantum communications, and her methods were being studied in engineering academies across dozens of worlds. The Zirian situation was typical of the impossible problems humans were increasingly called to solve. The tunnel collapse had created an unstable cavity filled with toxic gases and structural debris. Traditional rescue methods required weeks of careful excavation, assuming the trapped miners could survive that long on emergency supplies. The human team that arrived consisted of just 5 individuals, led by a grizzled foreman named Marcus Webb, who looked like he'd been carved from the same stone they were meant to move. Their equipment fit in a single transport shuttle and included items that made the watching Velconian engineers cringe with embarrassment. Pneumatic jacks, hydraulic rams, and metal pipe sections. Dr. Ahana observed as the humans unloaded their gear. "These tools are centuries behind our standard extraction technology." Marcus overheard the comment and grinned, his weathered face creasing with amusement. "Doc, sometimes the old ways are the best ways, especially when the new ways aren't working." The human approach was characteristically direct. Instead of trying to excavate through the unstable debris field, they drilled a narrow access shaft from a different angle, following natural fault lines in the rock that their handheld scanners had identified. The shaft was too small for conventional rescue equipment, but perfect for their purposes. "We're not going to dig them out," Marcus explained to the assembled Velconian rescue teams. "We're going to build them a bridge." The bridge turned out to be an ingenious system of telescoping support structures that could be fed through the narrow shaft and assembled remotely. Using nothing more than hydraulic pressure and mechanical leverage, the humans created a stable framework that allowed the trapped miners to crawl to safety one by one. The entire operation took 18 hours instead of the projected 3 weeks. More importantly, all 17 trapped miners survived without serious injury. "How did you know the fault lines would provide structural stability?" Dr. Ahana asked as the last miner emerged from the tunnel. "Rock's been doing its job for millions of years," Marcus replied simply. "Sometimes you just have to trust it to keep doing what it's always done." But the real shock came when the Velconian government received the bill for the rescue operation. The humans had charged less than a tenth of what conventional methods would have cost, despite achieving better results in a fraction of the time. "This makes no economic sense," the Minister of Resource Management complained to his advisors. How can primitive methods be more efficient than advanced technology? The answer was spreading through the galaxy like ripples from a dropped stone. Human engineering wasn't more advanced than galactic standard technology. It was more flexible. Where other species had spent millennia perfecting specific solutions to known problems, humans had developed the ability to improvise solutions to unknown problems. The effect was most dramatic in fields where conventional approaches had reached theoretical limits. Ship designers who had spent centuries optimizing hull configurations for maximum energy efficiency suddenly found humans building vessels that sacrificed elegance for adaptability. The ships were uglier, noisier, and required more maintenance than Galactic Council standards, but they could operate in conditions that would cripple more sophisticated vessels. Captain Rex Laura of the Deep Space Merchant Marine learned this firsthand when her crystalline cargo hauler suffered catastrophic engine failure in the Vega Nebula. The nebula's electromagnetic interference made sophisticated self-repair systems useless, stranding her ship with a crew of 43 and a cargo of time-sensitive medical supplies. The rescue ship that responded to her distress call was a human merchant vessel called the Persistent Sally, a battered-looking craft that seemed to be held together with metal patches and determination. Captain Jake Morrison looked like he'd been flying through asteroid fields for longer than Rex Lora's entire species had known about space travel. "Don't worry, Captain," Morrison said over the comm channel, his voice carrying the calm confidence that was becoming synonymous with human engineering. "We've got you covered." The Persistent Sally docked with Rex Lora's disabled hauler using mechanical grappling arms instead of sophisticated magnetic couplers. Human engineers wearing simple pressure suits began swarming over the crystalline ship's engine section, carrying toolboxes that looked like museum artifacts. "They're going to repair quantum phase inducers with hand tools," Rex Lora's chief engineer asked in disbelief. "Not repair," Morrison corrected through the comm. "Replace. Your quantum system's too complicated for field service, so we're going to swap it out for something simpler." What followed was the kind of engineering improvisation that was becoming the stuff of legend. The human team removed the failed quantum drive and installed what they called a backup propulsion unit, essentially a scaled-up version of the chemical rockets that had first carried humans into space. The replacement engine was crude, inefficient, and produced exhaust that glowed with radioactive emissions. It was also completely functional and capable of propelling Rex Lora's ship at respectable interstellar velocities. "This engine will get you home," Morrison explained as his crew finished the installation. "It's not pretty, but it works. And when you get to a proper shipyard, they can put your quantum drive back together properly." "But the power coupling systems are completely incompatible," Rex Lora protested. "How did you make it interface with our ship's control networks?" One of the human engineers, a young woman whose coveralls were covered with radiation warning patches, held up a device that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts and optimism. "Universal translator," she said with a grin. "Takes your ship's commands and translates them into something our engine can understand. Not elegant, but it works." The jury-rigged system carried Rex Lora's ship safely back to civilized space, where Galactic Council engineers spent 3 days trying to understand how the human modifications could possibly function. The interface device violated several basic principles of quantum mechanics and appeared to ignore the conservation of energy entirely. "It shouldn't work," the chief yard engineer admitted to Rex Lora. "According to our understanding of physics, this device should have torn itself apart the moment you activated it." "But it does work," Rex Lora pointed out. "Maybe there's something wrong with our understanding." That conversation was being repeated across the galaxy as more species encountered human engineering solutions that achieved impossible results through methods that made no theoretical sense. The humans weren't breaking the laws of physics exactly, but they were finding creative interpretations that no one else had considered. Dr. Velsala, the galaxy's leading expert on quantum mechanics, found himself completely baffled by a human-built mining laser that somehow achieved greater efficiency than the mathematical maximum his equations predicted. When he visited the human facility that had built the device, he expected to find sophisticated laboratories and advanced testing equipment. Instead, he found a workshop that looked like it belonged in a pre-industrial society. Human technicians were assembling quantum resonance chambers using hand tools and measurement devices that Dr. Velsala wouldn't have trusted to calibrate a child's toy. How do you achieve quantum coherence without precision environmental controls? He asked the workshop supervisor, a middle-aged human named Betty Kowalski, whose hands were permanently stained with machine oil. Trial and error, mostly, Betty replied, adjusting something inside the resonance chamber with what appeared to be a bent metal rod. When it sounds right, it usually is. Sounds right. Sure. Quantum fields have a natural resonance frequency. If you listen carefully, you can hear when they're in harmony. Dr. Velsala spent 3 days in the workshop, watching humans tune quantum equipment by ear, while achieving precision that his most sophisticated instruments couldn't match. When he published his report, his colleagues assumed he'd suffered some kind of psychological breakdown. But the evidence was undeniable. Human-built equipment was outperforming galactic standard technology in field after field, not through superior engineering, but through superior adaptability. Where other species built devices to operate within strict parameters, humans built devices that could be modified on the fly to handle whatever conditions they encountered. The economic implications were staggering. Supply chains that had remained stable for centuries suddenly found themselves disrupted by human contractors who could deliver superior results at lower costs. Trade routes that had been considered unprofitable because of harsh conditions became viable when human ships proved capable of operating where more advanced vessels failed. The Galactic Trade Commission found itself facing a crisis that had no precedent in recorded history. How do you regulate an economy when one species is systematically outcompeting everyone else using methods that shouldn't work? The humans are violating the fundamental principles of technological development, Commissioner Thexnaga complained during an emergency session. They're achieving advanced results with primitive methods. It's economically impossible. And yet it's happening, pointed out trade analyst Morgeth. Human contractors are fulfilling contracts that other species have classified as impossible. They're opening markets that we thought were permanently closed. The crisis deepened when several major corporations began attempting to reverse engineer human methods. The results were universally disastrous. When the Christek Syndicate tried to copy a human mining technique, their equipment suffered catastrophic failures that destroyed an entire extraction facility. The Luminal Engineering Collective's attempt to duplicate human ship modifications resulted in 3 vessels disappearing in a hyperspace with no trace. The problem, explained Dr. Sarah Mitchell during her testimony before the Trade Commission, is that you're trying to copy our solutions instead of understanding our methods. What's the difference? Commissioner Thexnaga asked. Our solutions are specific to particular problems. Our methods are applicable to any problem. When you copy our solutions, you're just building more advanced machines. When you understand our methods, you learn to think differently. And how does one learn to think differently? Sarah smiled with the expression that had become famous throughout the galaxy. By being willing to fail until you succeed. The concept was alien to most galactic civilizations. Species that had spent millennia perfecting their technologies and optimizing their processes found it almost impossible to accept that failure could be a valuable part of the learning process. But as more impossible problems were solved by human persistence and creativity, even the most skeptical observers were forced to acknowledge that something fundamental was changing. The change was most visible in the educational systems. Universities that had focused on teaching established knowledge began incorporating human methodology courses. Students learned to approach problems from multiple angles, to view failure as data rather than defeat, and to value adaptability over optimization. The results were remarkable. Zephyrian students who had struggled with rigid harmonic patterns suddenly began creating new musical forms that incorporated elements of chaos and improvisation. Velconian researchers who had been trapped by conventional thinking started making breakthrough discoveries by intentionally introducing random variables into their experiments. Even the ancient and conservative Gorlak Empire began sending their brightest students to human institutions, seeking to understand how such a young species could achieve such remarkable results. The sight of massive, stone-bodied Gorlaks learning to operate human drilling equipment became one of the most shared images in galactic communication networks. "It's not about the tools," explained Professor Martinez during a joint lecture at the Intergalactic Engineering Academy. "It's about the mindset. We don't build machines to work perfectly under ideal conditions. We build machines to keep working when conditions are terrible." "But surely optimization is still important," protested Dr. Krell-Voner, a distinguished luminal physicist. "Efficiency gains compound over time to create enormous advantages." "Sure," Martinez agreed. "But optimization assumes you know what you're optimizing for. When you're dealing with the unknown, adaptability beats efficiency every time." The philosophical implications were as profound as the practical ones. For millions of years, galactic civilization had equated progress with increasing sophistication. The most advanced species were those with the most elegant solutions, the most efficient processes, the most perfect optimization. But humans had demonstrated that there was another kind of advancement. Instead of perfecting solutions to known problems, they had perfected the ability to solve unknown problems. Instead of building the best possible tools for specific tasks, they had learned to make any available tool work for any necessary task. The ancient intelligence from the sphere had been right. The galaxy's strongest heroes had indeed been stunned when they discovered that the species they considered fragile possessed a strength that none of their advanced technologies could match. It wasn't the strength of energy manipulation or quantum engineering. It was the strength of refusal. The absolute refusal to accept that any problem was truly impossible. And as word of human achievements spread through trade networks and communication channels, reaching species and civilizations that had never heard of Earth, a new phrase began appearing in dozens of languages. "When all else fails, call the humans." 2 years after the first impossible drill had cracked open the ancient sphere, the galaxy faced a crisis that would test everything the humans had taught them about persistence and adaptability. The threat came from beyond the rim of known space, and it was unlike anything in the historical records of any civilization. The first sign was the disappearance of the Helix Nebula's monitoring stations. 7 automated observation posts, scattered across 3 light years, went silent simultaneously. When the Galactic Defense Fleet arrived to investigate, they found nothing but empty space where sophisticated installations had operated for centuries. "Complete molecular disintegration," reported Admiral Kexthara, Commander Zekthara's cousin, whose crystalline form resonated with barely contained fear. "Whatever did this didn't just destroy our equipment. It erased it from existence." The second sign was worse. The star system of Kepler 438, home to 2 billion Vulcanian colonists, began exhibiting impossible gravitational anomalies. Planets shifted in their orbits despite no visible external forces, and the star itself flickered between different spectral classifications as if reality couldn't decide what it was supposed to be. By the time the evacuation fleet arrived, the entire system had vanished, leaving nothing but a perfectly spherical void in space where 15 solar masses should have been. "It's not a black hole," Dr. Ahana reported to the emergency council session, her tentacles writhing with distress. "Black holes bend spacetime. This appears to be the complete absence of spacetime, as if that region of the universe simply stopped existing." The attacks continued with increasing frequency and scale. Mining operations, research stations, even heavily defended military installations vanished without warning or explanation. The enemy remained invisible to all sensors, immune to all weapons, and seemed capable of erasing matter from reality itself. Panic spread through galactic civilization faster than the news of the attacks. Species that had enjoyed peace for millennia suddenly found themselves facing an enemy that rendered all their advanced technology useless. How do you fight something that can make your weapons stop existing? Emergency sessions of the Galactic Council became daily occurrences as representatives from hundreds of worlds demanded action. The greatest military minds in the galaxy worked around the clock to develop strategies, but every plan required weapons and ships that could be erased from existence without warning. "We need to evacuate the core worlds," urged Counselor Drexhan, his energy form flickering with unprecedented uncertainty. "If these attacks continue to escalate, we could lose entire sectors." "Evacuate to where?" demanded Admiral Veltar of the Infernal Legion. "These entities have already demonstrated the ability to reach any system we can. There is nowhere to run." "Then we fight," declared War Chief Gokmash of the Gorlak Empire, his massive stone form radiating determination. "My warriors fear no enemy, no matter how strange." "Your warriors cannot fight something that doesn't exist," Dr. Ahana pointed out gently. "How do you strike at an enemy that exists outside normal space-time?" The debate continued for hours, cycling through the same arguments and reaching the same conclusions. Every conventional approach required engaging with an enemy that seemed to exist beyond conventional reality. Traditional weapons were useless against foes that could simply erase them before they arrived. It was High Resonator Kethmore who finally spoke the words that everyone was thinking, but none wanted a voice. "Perhaps," he said, his crystalline form dimming with reluctant admission, "it is time to ask the humans for their perspective." The suggestion created a moment of absolute silence in the chamber. For 2 years, the galaxy's most advanced civilizations have been learning to incorporate human methodology into their thinking. But this was different. This wasn't a mining problem or an engineering challenge. This was warfare against an enemy that defied the fundamental laws of physics. The humans have no military experience beyond their own planetary conflicts, Admiral Kexthara protested. How could they possibly comprehend the scale of this threat? "They comprehended the sphere when we could not," Zekthara reminded the assembly, "and they solved problems we had classified as impossible. Perhaps their unique perspective might reveal something we're missing." The vote was closer than anyone expected. Species that had grudgingly accepted human engineering methods balked at the idea of human military strategy. But as reports of new disappearances reached the chamber during the debate, pragmatism eventually overcame pride. The human delegation that arrived 3 days later was smaller than anyone expected. Just 12 individuals, led by a quiet woman named Colonel Elena Vasquez, whose simple uniform bore no decorations or insignia of rank. With her came a mixed team of engineers, physicists, and what appeared to be combat veterans whose scarred faces spoke of experience with impossible situations. "Colonel Vasquez," Counselor Drexhan addressed the human leader, "we face an enemy that exists beyond conventional reality. They can erase matter from existence and ignore all known laws of physics. How does your species propose to fight such entities?" Elena studied the tactical displays for several minutes, her dark eyes taking in the pattern of attacks and the defensive measures that had failed to stop them. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the same calm confidence that had become the human trademark. "We don't fight them," she said simply. "We make them fight us." The distinction seemed meaningless to most of the assembled delegates, but Zekthara had learned to pay attention when humans made statements that sounded nonsensical. "Explain," he requested. "Everything about these attacks suggests the enemy prefers to engage on their terms," Elena continued, highlighting specific data points on the display. "They strike without warning at isolated targets, using abilities that our technology can't counter. That's not a winning strategy, it's a predator strategy." "What's the difference?" Admiral Veltar demanded. "Predators avoid fair fights," answered Major Harrison, one of Elena's team members whose voice carried the gravel of a career soldier. "They pick off weak targets and avoid anything that might fight back effectively. If these entities were truly invincible, they wouldn't need to be so careful about target selection." "They're testing us," Elena concluded, "learning about our capabilities, our responses, our weaknesses. That means they're not sure they can win a direct confrontation." Dr. Ahana's tentacles coiled with skepticism. "But They've destroyed every defensive installation we've tried to protect. How do you define fighting back effectively against entities that can erase matter from existence? Elena smiled, and for a moment she looked remarkably like Sarah Mitchell facing an impossible drilling problem. You make them work for it, she said, and you make sure the work teaches you something about them. The human plan was audacious in its simplicity. Instead of trying to protect scattered installations across the galaxy, they would concentrate their forces around a single target and wait for the enemy to attack. But the target wouldn't be defended with conventional weapons or shields. It would be defended with the most powerful force in the human arsenal: stubbornness. You want to use the mining platform at Kepler 442b as bait? Admiral Kextera asked in disbelief. The same platform where you first encountered the ancient sphere? It's perfect, Elena explained. High strategic value, isolated enough that the enemy won't suspect a trap, and we already know the terrain. Plus, the ancient installation might give us some advantages. What Elena didn't mention immediately was that her team had been in contact with the ancient intelligence since their arrival. The entity had shared disturbing information about the attackers. They were not invaders from another galaxy, but something far worse. They're the void between thoughts. The ancient voice had whispered in their minds. The hunger that exists in empty space. They have devoured countless civilizations by erasing their reality piece by piece, until nothing remains but the memory of what was lost. How do you fight something like that? Elena had asked. The same way you fight any hunger, the entity had replied. You feed it something it cannot digest. The preparations took 2 weeks. Human engineering teams worked alongside the galaxy's best technical minds to convert the mining platform into something unprecedented. They stripped away every sophisticated system, every quantum processor, every piece of technology that relied on advanced physics. In their place, they installed mechanical systems so primitive that they seemed to belong in a museum. Steam-powered generators, mechanical computing engines, chemical propellant weapons, and communication systems that relied on radio waves rather than quantum entanglement. This is madness. Admiral Veltar protested as he watched human technicians install what appeared to be manually operated artillery guns. You're defending against reality-warping entities with technology that predates space travel. That's the point, Major Harrison replied, adjusting the manual sights on a chemical explosive launcher. These entities manipulate advanced technology by erasing it from existence. But they can't erase something that doesn't rely on advanced physics in the first place. The trap was baited with carefully leaked intelligence about a desperate last stand at the mining platform. The Galactic Defense Fleet withdrew to what appeared to be a safe distance, leaving only a skeleton crew of volunteers to defend the installation with laughably primitive weapons. The enemy took the bait within hours. The attack began like all the others. Reality itself seemed to flicker around the platform as impossible forces pressed against the barrier between dimensions. Sophisticated scanning equipment throughout the system simply stopped existing as the entities attempted to apply their reality-warping abilities. But the mechanical sensors kept working. Steam-powered radar dishes continued their slow rotation. Mechanical chronometers maintained their steady ticking, and human engineers with analog instruments tracked the approaching threat through methods that predated galactic civilization. Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, reported Sergeant Shun, reading coordinates from mechanical instruments that looked like they belonged in an ancient submarine. Range approximately 5,000 kilometers and closing. All stations, prepare for engagement. Elena commanded through a speaking tube that carried her voice to gun emplacements throughout the platform. The first salvo of chemical explosives launched into apparently empty space, guided by targeting calculations performed on mechanical computers. To most observers, the humans appeared to be firing blindly at nothing. Then something screamed. The sound came from everywhere and nowhere, a harmonic of pain and surprise that resonated through dimensions the assembled fleet hadn't known existed. For the first time since the attacks began, the enemy had been forced to reveal themselves. They were visible for only seconds, writhing masses of dark energy that seemed to bend space around them like gravitational lenses. But those seconds were enough for the human artillery teams to adjust their aim and fire again. Chemical explosives bloomed in the void like ancient flowers, each detonation marking another impossible hit on targets that shouldn't have been vulnerable to primitive weapons. The entities tried to erase the incoming projectiles from existence, but found that simple chemical compounds with mechanical detonators didn't rely on the kinds of sophisticated physics they could manipulate. They can't erase something that never existed in their reality framework, Elena explained over the communication system as explosions lit up the space around the platform. Our weapons are too primitive for their abilities to target. The battle lasted 6 hours and established new principles of warfare that would reshape galactic military doctrine for generations. The humans had proven that sometimes the most advanced enemies could be defeated by the most primitive methods, simply because those methods operated outside